Greetings and welcome to the Home Slice. This is a standard intro. If you already know what's up with my 40mm Manila rope testing, the ANDE rope test, then you can skip to this time listed on screen. This is where the actual edge test begins. If you haven't been here before, then you've caught me in the middle of a testing series where I'm taking Victorinox knives because they're simple steel that's mainly just steel. There's not a bunch of extra alloys and carbide things going on in them. And I'm testing what different sharpening stones do to them. I'm testing fine, medium, and coarse stones individually. Then I'm taking the best from those and I'm making what's called a dual grit edge. If you're new to the channel, a dual grit edge is where you sharpen one side coarse or medium and the other side of the edge you sharpen fine. It has some really interesting characteristics. Usually it creates an aggressive edge that lasts longer than it normally would with either coarse or fine, with some exceptions, which we're testing to find out. Anyway, my test consists of, I've got a little goofy rig that I slice through a 1 centimeter thick sisal rope, and it's on a 45-degree wedge. It's intended to transfer that force down, and then I measure how many kilograms of pressure it took to slice through the rope while holding the rope vertical. That's intended to take forward motion and quantify how much pressure it took to slice through. This gives you some rough idea of edge aggression. The next test is to cut through a 40mm thick Manila rope, and then I test on a Best machine tester to test how keen and nice the edge stayed. I do that until it's over 400 grams on the Best tester, checking with microscope and checking to see when it loses shaving capability in between tests. After 3, I will hammer the edge into a pine piano leg, and that's just to see if any of the edges break on impact. There are certain sharpening methods I've found that create an edge that's not as robust to impact tasks, and I want to kind of weed those out because for a working edge, I want it to be reasonably durable. Anyway, that's what we're testing for today. In just a second, we'll skip right over to the test footage, and I will let you know what the finishing stone that we're actually testing was.
Just a note before we get started, some guys have asked for scaling, and this is a measuring tape in millimeters. And as I try to get that mark on the left-hand side centered, I find I can't quite get the mark on the right on screen. So my best guess is that fully zoomed in, as all these tests are, my microscope, the full screen shoots about 1.8 millimeters. Now I've put 36 hyphens on screen, which means each of those is roughly 50 microns. So I'll bring that back later in the videos for scale. Back again with some dual grit testing. Our initial best number is about 50 grams better than the last test, which is encouraging for the Shapton Glass 8000 grit. We're frozen here to show that actually our aggression reading is exactly the same as the last test, which is good, but not the best we've seen. The coarse side, as usual, looks pretty beautiful in terms of aggression. That 250 grit Easy Lap Diamond Stone creates quite a nice texture in my experience. Those two dashes are about 100 microns wide, and you can see that some of the scratches from that 250 grit stone are bordering on about 50 microns wide, so big chunks of diamond in there. A look at the Shapton Glass fine side reveals some concerning elements. We had a bit of wire edge in the last test from the Japanese natural stone, and while this doesn't look as bad, it doesn't look totally clean. I'm still not 100% sure what a dual grit edge should look like, and I'll need to get an edge sharpened with my normal dual grit method under the microscope soon for comparison. After the first pass, we're at just 314 grams, but not quite as good as the Shapton Glass by itself, interestingly. However, by the second pass, we are flirting with that 400-gram line and just narrowly missed the ending of the test there. With the third pass, we've come back down to 355, which is similar behavior to the last test. So we'll see how it looks under the microscope. I've frozen it here at the max reading, which is 5.8 kilos. If you take out the rig weight, we've lost about 2.4 kg from the original number, or gained, I guess I should say, which is not a bad number, but it's nowhere near the crystalline and CBN numbers that were getting put up. There's maybe some hints of edge bending beginning, but nothing that looks overly concerning and nothing too bad compared to the last test. Ironically, it seems that in a dual grit edge, the softer the stone, the more it perhaps cleans up the edge, where the harder, more unyielding stones actually seem to remove less of the damage caused by that coarse stone on the other side. After the impact test, we're all the way up to 466. So while the Shapton on both sides produced one of the best numbers for an impact test in a dual grit edge, it's not removing quite enough metal to make it stable. That sawdust kind of there marks the beginning of the impact zone, and you can see little sections wiggling back and forth. 111 grams of lost in the impact test does indicate an edge that is not ultra stable. Pass 4 brings us up to 395, just squeaking our way by that 400 gram line, but surviving. And indeed, this Shapton Glass edge was a good survivor. 396 on the 5th pass takes us to a 6th pass through the ANDE rope. That's nearly our record for longevity. So we got good longevity, good crisp feeling to begin with, but poor stability. On the 6th pass, the edge finally died, but so did my camera, and so I had to come back with my phone. But this has been the longest lasting dual grit edge so far. What I'd like to do is figure out how to clean it up for better stability. My last dual grit test with the Japanese natural stone is on screen now. Peace out from the home slice.